Welcome to the Black Gems Dive In Podcast, the podcast where we dive deep into conversations about inclusive cultures and everything DEI. Your co-hosts are Kua and Kendra, and we're thrilled to be your hosts as we explore the crucial topics shaping our workplaces and communities today. In each episode, we'll unpack insights, share stories, and engage with experts to foster a deeper understanding of how we can create more inclusive environments where everyone feels valued and empowered.
Hey, Kua.
Hey, Kendra.
So we're back for another episode.
Another episode of the Black Gems Dive In Podcast.
Yeah, and this one's a little special.
Yeah.
Because this one we were live on location, but also today marks the second anniversary of 5/14, May 14th. 2 years ago, where we had a racist violence attack on our community, and where we had 10 wonderful, beautiful lives taken from us. And also, too, we have some survivors as well. And so we were able to attend some of the events that were happening and talking to people live on location. But before we even talk about that, I guess my question to you is, what does 5/14 mean to you?
Wow. And that's a heavy and deep question, because it's crazy that 2 years have passed that quickly. I remember, actually, I was going to get my hair braided, right? I think everyone remembers where they were that day. 5/14 in Buffalo is like 9/11 in the U.S., right? It's a date that we'll never forget. 10 Black lives were lost, and this was a racially motivated terrorist attack in our community. I remember I was going to get my hair braided, and I saw all these police cars that were, just zooming. I think it was down Utica Ave, or Utica Street. And I was like, man, something happened. And I didn't know what it was, but literally
it felt like every police car in the city of Buffalo.
Every police car in the city of Buffalo was going. And so I had gotten to my braider's house, and I remember like, girl, something happened. I don't know what happened, but I saw all these, cars zooming down Utica. And shortly after that is when we got the news, right, that there was a attack. Now, we didn't know what had exactly happened, but we knew that there was an attack in our community, and there were multiple casualties at that point. And so he targeted the only grocery store on Buffalo's east side that serves a large area in the community. And we later found out that it was racially motivated, that there was a manifesto that I don't know if he had written or, was connected to, but he live streamed him executing 10 of our community members. And I just remember the weight of what that felt like. And it's crazy because, as you'll see in one of our interviews with Councilwoman Zaneta Everhart, she had talked about just the weather that day. And so you have to imagine, right, this is 2022, 2 years ago, and we're kind of getting out of the pandemic, not even fully out of the pandemic, but it was just like, we were shut down for a long time. The weather was starting to break. I think in Buffalo, you got to know that, our weather is peculiar, and sometimes in May it could snow. But I just remember feeling like, oh my gosh, it's a nice day. And I feel like, our friends, we were starting to get ready to just start to be outside, y'all. And so we had plans. I was going to get my hair braided. It was going to be a great weekend. And then that major incident happened in our community, and it changed the trajectory of, the start of spring and the summer. And so it was a beautiful day. It felt like a great day. And then all of a sudden it was like clouds that came out of nowhere and, really just shifted our perspective in terms of what we were expecting that summer and how we're going to enter it. And so I remember right away, right, the grocery store was closed. A lot of folks rely on that grocery store as the only means of getting food and supplies and things like that. And so we started volunteering. Jamil actually and a couple other folks put a visual together, and so it was a lot of folks just coming into the community and really rolling up their sleeves and doing what needed to be done. But it's a moment I'll never forget. I knew one of the victims. I did a lot of community work at a previous job of mine. And so Kat Massey, when I found out that she was one of those victims, it really just weighed heavy on me. And I remember reading, I think it was a Times article at that time that came out, and they talked about how, and I still get emotional when I think about this, but I remember just kind of like dropping my phone and just, really, it hit me. because the family couldn't find her, right? And I talked about the story of the brother. He usually goes between Wegmans and Tops. And I guess this time around, she was like, yeah, you could just take me to Tops because it's right there. She grew up in the Fruit Belt. Her brothers and sisters, there was like 3 homes that they had right in a row. They did community cleanups. I remember talking to her specifically about getting supplies and things like that when they would do community cleanups. And when they were looking for her, they couldn't find her. And then the story talked about how, you know, she had arthritis and really bad arthritis, and they couldn't find her. And the coroner was asking questions, qualifying questions around, you know, what she might have had on. And they talked about her hands, and the coroner was like, yeah, I have your sister, right? And they could only recognize her by her hands. And so when I think about this day, you know, it weighs heavy. It's very personal. This community is so tight-knit that everybody had some type of connection to at least one of the people and victims in this racist massacre. And, you know, we still talk about it. It's still something that folks are trying to gather different ideas and strategies how to change the community, but it's a day that I won't forget. Yeah, it's a day that I won't forget.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about just, you know, where we are now 2 years later, and I have a very similar sentiment as you of 2 years ago of, you know, you remember what you were doing and where you were. It's like the city just stopped, right? Yeah. And when the news started just coming out who the victims were, it was like blow after blow after blow because you knew somebody associated. And to your point about where Jefferson is a community where historically is a Black community where people will go grocery shopping, go to cleaners, bookstores, businesses lined up. And then it kind of went very quiet for a while. Now people are back on Jefferson trying to open things back up. And so you see community now it's taking some time to get back to where it was historically, but you have businesses moving back on Jefferson. You're seeing more dollars being put into the community and things like that. But still today is that day where you remember exactly what happened 2 years ago. And so as we reflect and we talk about kind of where we are, we were able to attend the Remembrance today and walk through the garden in which the memorial is now set, and some of just the sculptures that are out there, and talking to just the community and what that looks like. And, you know, for a moment I was paralyzed. I was paralyzed. I looked at you and I just like, is this real? Did this really happen? And so I don't want this day for people to forget, because we have to continue to carry out the legacy of those community members who were lost. And so, but you know, we were able to have conversations with three people today. One of them being, as you talked about, Councilwoman Zaneta Everhart, where her son Zaire was shot during that day. He was a worker at Tops, but he, thank God, survived. And so we talked to her about her story and what has fueled her to make Buffalo better. And so some of the initiatives that she's put forth and those conversations, and we were able to talk to 2 other people as well.
One of those other folks is the mayor of Buffalo, right? Mayor Byron Brown, who actually he corrected me, right? Because in that moment, we actually sit in Jamil's studio, Cruise Control Media, and my business is in the Beverly Gray, the Exchange at Beverly Gray, which is on Utica and Jefferson. So from our offices, we can actually see the Tops. You can see the parking lot, and you can see all the events that was happening today. And honestly, that happened 2 years ago, right? And the things that have happened since. But we talked to the mayor, and he corrected me in saying that he was one of the folks that was really instrumental in bringing the grocery store to this community, and how you know, folks wanted like a co-op model to come here, and he was really pushing the chain commercial grocery store. So he talks about that. He talks about what he sees as his vision for Buffalo and what he saw today, right, as well. And then the last person.
We were able to talk to Greg Jackson, who is the special assistant to the president of the United States, as well as deputy director of the Office of Gun Prevention. And so he's been to Buffalo a couple of times, and he has talked about the community and how he rolled up his sleeves as soon as the massacre happened, where he took off his blazer and started packing potatoes and carrying potatoes for community members. So we talked to him about his story, some of the initiatives that are coming out of that office, and then also to the importance of the Black vote.
Yeah, and, you know, knowing that this is an election year, there's been a lot of conversations that have happened. And honestly, I think we should do an episode talking about what's at risk and at stake, I think, in this election. And so we got his perspective on what he thought about this upcoming election and the importance of the vote specifically. But, you know, it's just, it was a somber moment, but at the same time, it was a celebration of the lives that we lost so that we don't forget them, ever forget them. And so the monument that they put together was beautifully done. It has Andinkra symbols, which are Ghanaian symbols, and the connection to Cat Massey again, right? They did a community garden that has Andinkra symbols in it, and so this is in the Fruit Belt neighborhood and community, and so I just think those connections are subtle connections that are being made, and I know she would be really proud of this, and so we were able to look at that and just get a sense of the community coming together once again. I think we also seen the need for change in this community. And so I know there are a lot of initiatives that are happening, and we'll have to see if we can get more folks on to talk specifically about, a lot of folks say 513 and before, right? So the conditions that caused this racist massacre to happen allowed this white guy from 3 hours away to look up this neighborhood and know where a huge mass of Black people were to target our community. And so I think even from that standpoint, there's a lot that needs to be uncovered. I know there's a lot of initiatives that are happening since then. There was also an announcement of like a $15 million art project memorial that'll be happening in the community as well. And so I don't know if they've chosen that site yet.
They haven't chosen a site, but they have about $4 or $5 million already allocated towards it from the state and some others, and so the rest will continue to be raised. But, the renderings of that was beautiful. So looking forward to seeing where that's going to be unveiled in the near future.
So lots to come from that. I think as much as this is a somber moment and just a recognition of what's happened in our community, it's also an opportunity to look at what's to come. And so I think for our sake, you know, you'll hear that in the stories that we were able to get today from the community that we talked to, but then also give us really a charge to, you know, follow through with more to come. 2 years ago also, around that time, we were privileged to sit down with the National Civil Rights Museum president, Dr. Wigington. Then we talked about it, like our story and our connection to Memphis and the museum in prior episodes. But just, you know, the culmination of what's happened from that point. And so we've been doing a lot of different work, you know, individually and together on the pod. But I think for us, when I think about, like, you know, the past 2 years and how we've been able to be consistent in putting different content and things like that out there, I think our voices are needed more now than ever, right? And trying to tell some of those stories and connect the dots to what's to come in our community and in our nation too.
And to continue to amplify the voices of those who are doing the work day in and day out. There's some amazing people out today. We were talking to, in terms of like just a response team for a crisis, and Lenny Lane. So we have to have him on the pod, but there's a lot of great work that's being done, and hopefully we can continue to highlight that as well. But definitely, as Kua said, you know, a call to action is needed. And we want to make sure that this is something that's sustainable.
Absolutely.
Not a one and done. So if you're out there and you're doing the work, great. That is amazing. Keep it up. You know, let's continue to get at that together. But also, too, if you're figuring out what to do, just get involved. Get involved in organization, the community, because you're also needed as well. And so this is a call to action. But, you know, we were able to attend the Remembrance and just continue to uplift those families.
So thanks for listening. You're about to hear those voices that we were able to interview, and more to come from us on that. So we'll see y'all for the next episode. All right. Peace.
Bye.
Testing. That's good. All right, so we are here at the Remembrance of the 514 event in Buffalo, New York. 2 years ago, 10 lives were taken at the hands of a racist shooter that came into our community. And so we're here with Mayor Byron Brown. We want to just kind of talk to you about, today, what today is really, I guess, signaling, right, in terms of what we've been in our community and where we are trying to go.
Today is the second somber anniversary of the 514 racially motivated mass shooting in our community. The Tops Friendly Markets, Tops Supermarket, opened an honor space in honor of the victims of that mass shooting. 10 lives that were taken, 3 others that were injured. All of those that spoke today talked about the unity in our community, the strength of our community, people working together like never before, and what individuals are doing and what we are doing collectively to build and strengthen East Buffalo.
And I guess when we're looking at Jefferson Avenue, which has historically been a place for the Black community to come and thrive and shop and just talk about community and unity, what does Jefferson Avenue mean to you in the city of Buffalo?
Jefferson Avenue is the heart of Buffalo's Black community. It was the heart of commerce in Buffalo's Black community. And I am confident that it will be that again. There are millions and millions of dollars that have been allocated for Jefferson Avenue at the city, county, state, and federal levels of government. That money has already begun to flow in the community, and in 2 years, in 4 years, in 6 years, I believe that we will see a completely physically transformed Jefferson, a Jefferson that will be the heart and soul of this community physically again.
Absolutely, we're definitely looking forward to that as well.
Yes.
And so, Mayor, I just want to ask you a question. My business is out of the Beverly Gray Center here, located on Utica and Jefferson Avenues. And she was really instrumental in bringing this Tops to the community. They often talk about, the fight that it took to get, folks really able to get access to a grocery store. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Well, I would say in actuality, as a city council member, the Tops was my project.
Okay.
It was my project to bring the Tops to the community. In fact, when I was first running for the council, one of the major points of debate at that time was a corporate supermarket or a co-op supermarket.
Okay.
And the person that was in the campaign that I was running against believed that we could never get a corporate supermarket to come to East Buffalo and that we had to do a co-op supermarket.
Okay.
I took the opposing view and I was elected and worked with Crystal People-Stokes and others, including Tops. We must have reached out to every supermarket chain in the nation.
Okay.
And the first one that stepped up and said we're interested was Tops. And I spent months driving around with executives from Tops and actually selected this site with site selection professionals at Tops a little bit more than 19 years ago now.
Thank you for that correction.
That's how it happened.
No history lesson.
That's the reality
Yeah.
of how it happened.
Yeah.
So I know you're on a tight time schedule, so we appreciate you stopping by and having this conversation with us because we've been trying to have a conversation for a while. We're going to bring him back for a full conversation.
It is great to be with you all. You do a great job with your podcast. I know it's one of the hottest podcasts in Western New York, so it's an honor to be on with both of you.
Awesome. Can you just leave us with a few lasting words of just hope for our community?
You know, I've seen so many signs of unity in the community, so many ways that people are working together. So while this is a day of remembrance and reflection, it's also another step of hope and opportunity for the future of East Buffalo.
Absolutely. Well,
Thank you again, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All
All right, so we are here with Councilwoman Zaneta Everhart, and we are here talking about, again, the remembrance of 514 and that day and the significance of that day, and where we are 2 years later. But Zaneta, also too, your son Zaire's mom, Zaire's mom, also thankfully survived that day as he was an employee of Tops Market. So can you just describe to us the day, how it started, and where we are 2 years later?
Yeah, so, standing in this parking lot 2 years later is something else, right? We were just saying that the weather that day was absolutely gorgeous. And, in Buffalo in May, it could still be snowing, right? But it was absolutely beautiful. And I'm just so happy that the sun is out today, just like that day 2 years ago. Because, the sun is shining on us. Yeah. We shine it too, and it's beautiful. And, that day was such a, when I got up today, I was sitting in my sunroom and I was crying. I cried all day today and I couldn't stop crying. But it was gratefulness, right? Yeah. Just Zaire's out in the backyard this morning running around with the dog. I literally was just living in gratefulness this morning. And to think 2 years ago, it was the worst day of my life, right? I was, I was shopping actually. I was in another grocery store and Zaire called me and he was this side, right across the street. He got shot right in front of the store, but somebody helped him to get away from the store. Wow. Yeah. And and that was when the world changed forever.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. I can't even imagine, right? I know after the incident took place, the community really came together in a different type of way. And standing here today and looking out at how the community has come together again, right, in remembrance of those that we lost, but also those who survived the incident. And so, you've you ran a campaign. You are now the councilwoman of the Maston District.
How crazy.
I guess just kind of talk to us about that process, right? Like, where that inspiration came from. We've seen you going to advocate at the White House and really representing Buffalo and everything that has occurred since then. So talk a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, for me, running for office was not in the cards, right? I've said that many times listen, I am happy being a staffer. Right. I like the background, right? My background is in communications and media. I was a news producer. I love being behind the scenes. Yeah. I love that. But for years people were asking me you should run block club leaders. And that's really what spurred this. It was the Mama Charlene, it was the Stephanie Barber Jeter, the late Stephanie Barber Jeter, who took me under their wings and taught me everything they know. When I say I would sit on their porch and soak up the wisdom, right? And that's really what spearheaded all of this. And I remember before Stephanie passed away, before I even announced I was running, she was like, you are going to represent Maston. This was 6 years ago. Yeah. And I was like, girl, bye. Right? That is not my life. But, these last couple of years and just the network that I've been able to build up, knowing that I'm born and raised on the east side of Buffalo, and for me, it's just a little bit of change I've been able to do under the leadership of Senator Kennedy, now Congressman. For me, it was look at what I'm doing for my community, where I was born, where I was raised. And, all of those things played a part. And then, of course, 514 happened. And everyone was calling me, right? I remember the first headline that I seen after it broke that Zaire had got shot was Senator's staffer's son shot in mass shooting. And you know what I said? That's privilege.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna use it.
Okay.
And that's what spurred all of this.
Yeah.
And so yes, I did. I used that to my advantage to talk about not just that mass shooting, not just the 10 people that died that day, not just the survivors, not just Zaire, I used that moment to talk about the East Side. I talked about why do we only have one grocery store? Why do our neighborhoods look blighted like this for decades and for generations? You know, for me, that's where I was going with this, because that is the root cause as to why this happened. Because if anyone read the terrorist manifesto, he was completely poorly educated on who black people are in this country. And for me, it was like, no, I'm going to come out here and show y'all who we are on the East Side. Not East Buffalo, because, again, I don't know where that is. The East Side, right? This is my home. This is the place that raised me. And I want to do whatever I can. I got to keep my kid on that day. And for me, it's about paying it forward. I'm just giving back because I'm blessed. And running for office was my blessing to the community.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
And you are definitely paying it forward. I mean, Zaneta, in the past 2 years, we've seen you create Zaire's Book Club, which has touched many hearts and touched many kids and neighborhoods and communities. You have started, in combination with so many other people, the Buffalo Black Caucus, which was this past Saturday, which was amazing. Hood Tales. I mean, I was telling everyone Kelly Galloway's story from Hood Tales. It was a gaffe, so that is a story that needs to be told.
That came up as like literally the week before caucus. We literally just threw that into the mix because Kelly told me her story a couple of weeks before that, and I was like, we got to do that. And I was like, what if we just call it Hood Tales? And she started cracking up. But I was like, but you got to think about it. Like, when we think about Kelly's story and Thomas Gant's story, we think about my story and Mark Talley's story, right? And Eric Ross from I'm Living Bee. You think about those are some amazing Hood Tales that ended in an amazing way.
Absolutely.
And, you know, their trajectory is just getting started. And so for me, it was like, we got to start telling those stories. And so, yes, I'm saying it here now. We've already been talking about it. Hood Tales is about to be a thing.
We got to get you back on,
on the
Jamil. Podcast.
No, listen, seriously. I literally, this last couple of days since the caucus, we've been like, we're going to do Hood Tales. We're going to make it an actual community thing. Because we have to tell those success stories. Especially our children today, right? We talk about mass shootings. 6 kids just got shot a couple weeks ago right up the street on Jefferson. And so our kids need to hear those Hood Tales. They need to hear that it is okay that you come from the worst. I come from the worst of the worst, I'm telling you. When I tell my full story one day, everybody's going to be like, oh my God, really? And so we have to tell them those stories so they know that anything is possible. You can still do anything.
Absolutely. Well, we definitely appreciate you talking with us, Zaneta. We always have so close conversations all the time. So I appreciate you just coming on to our quick pod in the parking lot, but also to really remembering this day and remembering the triumphant stories that's coming out of it, remembering what community is and unity, and that we have to continue this path. And it's not just one day. It is something that all of us has to get on board, and we have to create this atmosphere.
Day. That is the one thing I've been telling people is that 514 for Zaire, for me, for the rest of the families, is 517. It's 522. It's 510. It is an everyday thing. So I just want people to remember to give these families some grace. If you see them, give them a smile and a nod. Send them some love, because this is heavy. This is heavy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. I love y'all.
Thank you. All right, so we're back and we have a special guest. We have Greg Jackson, who is the special assistant to the President of the United States. So we appreciate you coming on to our podcast, Black Gems Dive In, which we're filmed right here on out of Beverly Gray. And I had the opportunity to meet you a few months ago through the Urban League for Legislative Policy Conference. So I really appreciate you coming to Buffalo and having this conversation. So for those who don't know, can you explain what your role is working with the President of the United States?
Yeah, so I oversee the efforts to address gun violence from the White House's perspective. We have 4 charges. One is to implement the president's executive actions and laws that have been passed in Congress. 2, we identify new executive actions and new ideas to address violence. 3, we're building partnerships at the state and local level to help cities and governors and state legislators change policy to address this crisis. And then 4, to improve resources and services for communities that have been impacted by violence. like what happened here, unfortunately. How do we do better? Recognizing that for too often, the government has turned a blind eye on survivors of gun violence and turned a blind eye on what it does to communities. And so the president wants to change that, and our office is working on that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And so we heard your speech earlier today talking about how hours after that incident that took place 2 years ago, you came into Buffalo, into our community, and really talked about how you saw a community that was united, that came together. You talked about rolling up your sleeves and helping pass out food and things like that in our community. I guess I just want to get your perspective around, what you've seen today and what's happened since those 2 years.
Yeah, I'll never forget when I arrived, when I went to get my rental car, the guy was a brother, that was giving out the rental cars, and he said, "Let me make sure I get you something with some tent in it because they're out there hunting us." That was fresh off the plane. And I drove through what felt like a ghost town. Everyone was in the home, terrified, and frankly, I was terrified too. This is one of the worst, most horrific hate crimes that our country's ever seen, at least in recent history. And to be a black man just coming into town to try to help out, knowing that there were still ongoing threats, what was terrifying. But I also knew that this community doesn't have the luxury of leaving or choosing when or not to be a target. And so when I got here, I thought I would see that same energy of fear and anger. And I did see pain and sorrow, but what I saw was, they were playing music right here. There was a fish fry happening. There was a U-Haul truck. And people, and I remember these two older guys. I wish I could remember the church too. I was looking for them today. But they were unloading potatoes. And I said, man, who am I to come here and talk policy or do? I was like, I just threw my little blazer off and said, look, I got you. And they were like, well, who are you? Who do you work? I said, I'm just here to help.
Right.
And that's what we started to do. And we did that every day that I was here, right here in this lot. And we gave away toys to the youth and just tried to help where we could. And I remember I went to my first breakfast meeting and I saw all the community activists coming together to plan and strategize. And that's where I met many of you planning vigils and just figuring out how do we rebuild and recover from something so terrible. And that's what we do as a people. We've seen the most and the worst, frankly. And we always band together and recover. And so that was beautiful to me, and I was proud to just be able to pitch in. And it's also inspiring. I've been back multiple times since then. I've watched the people of Buffalo not only organize to make this community better, but really to be brave enough to go and testify before Congress, to sit down with the President of the United States, to sit down with Republicans and Democrats and say, look, something's got to change. And it did change. We passed the first bill in 30 years because of them, because of you all, because of this community, because of Uvalde, and because of so many survivors. The history changed forever. And I know that this White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention would not exist without activists like the folks that are here. I wouldn't have this job. Back then I was just a volunteer trying to help. Now I'm serving in the White House, in the West Wing, and that's because of the pure courage of the folks here to not just accept defeat and accept that pain, but to go out there and fight for us. And I'm just proud to be a part of it. And frankly, I never walked into that grocery store until today, and that was one of the darkest feelings. But coming out of it and seeing so many people standing here together was a reminder that we are building a new future for our folks.
Absolutely.
So it's inspiring.
Thank you for coming back.
And thank you for advancing some of these laws that we heard about, you've talked about in terms of gun violence. 2 years later, we still have a lot more work to do, but without your office and the president, we would not be where we are today with some of those laws. So we appreciate that. A lot of times we talk about, especially in our community, how sometimes black people are disenfranchised when it comes to voting. And so can you just talk to us a little bit about the importance of the black vote? We talk about get out and vote, souls to the polls every year. We know this year is really important to get out and vote. So can you just talk to us a little bit about the importance of voting, but then also to the importance of the black vote?
Well, on behalf of the White House, I can't talk a lot about elections. But what I can say is that the decision is very clear. Especially on issues of hate and gun violence. The previous president, when talking about the most recent gun mass shooting, he said the community's got to get over it. He's the same person who said that after Charlottesville happened, which was another hate-based attack, who said that, hey, there was good people on both sides. And that's a very different perspective on this crisis of hate and gun violence than what we have with the president we have now. We have someone who believes in our communities, that believes in the people, that believes that violence isn't here because of who we are. Violence is here is because of where America has failed. And the president is working to change that, investing $30 billion in gun violence prevention. Last year, we saw a 13% reduction in homicides, the steepest decline in American history. And the biggest declines were in the black community. And the president's proud of that, because he invested in community. And guess what? The community stepped up and started to change things. And he wants to build on that momentum because he believes in us. And I think that is the stakes that we're up against. Are we going to pivot back to a time where we lost historic number of lives and our communities were left without the resources to even rebuild and support each other? Or are we going to stick with the president who has shown time and time again that he stands with us, that he's invested in us, that he believes in us, but most importantly that he's going to fight for us? And that's the choice people have to make when it comes around to deciding on voting or even with how they want to step up and be heard. And so I know where I stand in that equation, and I think so many others will likely come to the same decision.
Yeah. Well,
thank you so much again for coming and chatting with us. We really appreciate your time today, and we hope to see you back in Buffalo in the future.
Of course, as long as I can go to Brothers.
There you go.
Anchor Bar.
Okay, the shout-outs are coming.
Buffalo wings. If I was some fried lobster, some mac and cheese.
Oh, there
Every time I come here,
the
garlic ties,
sauce.
they got the lasagna lobster, the lasagna rolls.
Oh, you have more than menu than we had.
Look, I'm here. So, as long as y'all feed me, I'm here.
We absolutely will. So
We
thank
will.
you again. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.